Hello students, my name is Abhishek Sudhir. I am an assistant professor at the Jindal Global Law School. Welcome to EPG Pathshala. The module we will be discussing today is the evolution of the right to freedom of religion. This module forms a part of the paper on civil and political rights. During the course of human history, several wars have been waged over the right of a group to freely profess its own religion. The struggle has not been an easy one, but after centuries, overt recognition is now being given by state actors to the right of a group to freely practice or profess its religion. Keeping this long struggle in mind, this module will chart the development of the right of the right to freedom of religion and conscience from the rule of Emperor Ashoka to the First Amendment of the US Constitution, which forms the basis of a modern secular state. The purpose of this module is twofold. The first object is to give the students an understanding of how the right to freedom of religion and conscience has evolved over several centuries of human history. The second objective is to help the students understand the manner in which the right to freedom of conscience and religion has developed gradually through political and apolitical discourses. Let's start by charting the developments predating the American Revolution. India's very own Emperor Ashoka was the first state actor to give the right to practice one's religion overt recognition. He had inscriptions carved on boulders and cave walls during his reign from 269 BC to 232 BC. These inscriptions came to be known as the Edicts of Ashoka, and it is in these inscriptions that one can find tangible evidence of Ashoka's efforts to promote religious tolerance. After watching the bloodshed at the Battle of Kalinga, as you might know, Emperor Ashoka converted to Buddhism and spent much of his life in propagation of the Buddhist faith. Ashoka, however, was not prejudiced towards any religion, despite being a Buddhist himself. He did not show any signs of intolerance towards non-Buddhists. The Edicts of Ashoka that I referred to a short while ago discuss the ideas of state morality and private or individual morality. Essentially, what Ashoka sought to do was to distinguish state morality from private morality. The former, state morality, according to Ashoka, was based on his administration and what he thought would be better for a more spiritual society, while the latter, private morality, he thought would be best for individuals to practice, with both of them inculcating Buddhist values of compassion, moderation, tolerance, and respect for all life. The duties of state were expanded to include in them the protection of all religions and an obligation to promote cordial relations between different religious groups. This process was institutionalized by setting up a Department of Religious Affairs. Think about it. What a revolutionary idea to have in such a predated ancient time. By setting up a Department of Religious Affairs, Ashoka ensured that this department would look after the affairs of various religious bodies, and also a department would encourage the practice of religion. One of the most important edicts of Ashoka was Edict number 12. This edict is worth reading out in full. Avoid the extolling of one's religion to the decrying of the religion of another, or speaking lightly of it without occasion or relevance. As proper occasions arise, persons of other religions should also be honored suitably. Acting in this manner, one certainly exalts one's own religionists and also helps persons of other religions. Acting in a contrary manner, one injures one's own religion and also does disservice to the religion of others. One who reverences one's own religion and disparages that of another from devotion to one's own religion and seeks to glorify it over all other religions does injure one's own religion. So look at this edict of Ashoka. What he's trying to tell his subjects is essentially avoid extolling one's own religion to the decrying of the religion of others. What he means by this, essentially, avoid extolling one's own religion to the decrying of the religion of others. What he means by this, essentially, is that you practice your faith. Your faith is something that you should keep to yourself. He doesn't necessarily say that you should not propagate your own faith, but he's absolutely clear in his mind that you should not propagate your faith in a manner that results in the faith of another's being decried. So if you follow one religion, you should follow that religion. You should propagate the faith and the virtues of that religion. But please do not, at the same time, decry or criticize or bring down another religion. Ashoka seeks to enforce a moral sanction on those who do so. He says that one who glorifies his religion to the cost of another individual's religion injures his very own religion. You can also see that the edicts of Ashoka were spread out far and wide. In the Western world, now that's the edicts of Ashoka. In the Western world, it's the Edict of Torda that is celebrated as the first European declaration of expansive religious toleration. The first edict was issued by the then King of Hungary, John Sigismund Zapolya. The edict went as follows: in every place the preachers shall preach and explain the gospel, each according to his understanding of it. And if the congregation like it, well. If not, no one shall compel them, for their souls would not be satisfied, but they shall be permitted to keep a preacher whose teaching they approve. Look at what Torda, the Edict of Torda, is trying to say. It says that in every place the preacher shall preach and explain the gospel, each according to his own understanding of it. What this essentially means is that there is no one clear understanding of the gospel, be it the Bhagavad Gita or the Bible. If the congregation like it, well, is what the edict says. What that essentially says is if those who are listening to the preacher like it, then so be it. Well, that's good. If not, no one shall compel them, for their souls would not be satisfied, but they shall be permitted to keep a preacher whose teaching they approve. So essentially, what the Edict of Torda is trying to say is that each and every person has the right to a preacher of his or her choice. Each and every person has the choice to be a part of a congregation that he or she chooses to be a part of. However, if they do not wish to be a part of a certain congregation, nobody can compel them to be a part of that congregation. Therefore, the edict continues, none of the superintendents or others shall abuse the preachers. No one shall be reviled for his religion by anyone, according to the previous statutes, and it is not permitted that anyone should threaten anyone else by imprisonment or by removal from his post for his teaching. The edict, again, tries to emphasize how important it is that the preacher should not be abused. And the edict also tries to emphasize that no one shall be reviled for his religion by anyone. No one should be victimized for their religious beliefs. And says emphatically, it is not permitted that anyone should threaten anyone else by imprisonment or by removal from his post for his teaching. Essentially, the edict is trying to say that each individual is free to teach, profess, practice, propagate his religion, and should be able to do so without any fear of sanction. In 1557, King Zapolya and his wife, Queen Isabella, also passed two further edicts of toleration and officially recognized the two sects of Christianity, Catholicism and Lutheranism. Now, think back to the Reformation in the 1500s. The Catholic Church had lost its monopoly over the Christian faith. The Reformation had resulted in a number of breakaway sects that broadly today are known as Protestants. One of those sects was the Lutheran sect, which King Zapolya's wife Isabella expressly recognized in 1557. The liberty of faith was extended to all as long as it did not interfere with the liberty of the other individuals, and even instructed for a national synod, a conclave, to be convened as to reduce religious differences. This recognition by Queen Isabella was nothing short of revolutionary. At a time when people were being at a time when people were being persecuted for their religious beliefs, to actually recognize a breakaway sect such as the Lutherans was nothing short of revolutionary. Her son, i.e. Isabella's son, further expanded the liberty to include Calvinists and Unitarians, also Christian sects of the Protestant faith. It's pertinent to note that only Christian religions were officially recognized. This is very important. Whereas Ashoka recognized all religions, the Edicts of Torda only recognized Christian religions and excluded Eastern Orthodoxy and Judaism and Armenianism. However, these religions, such as Judaism, were tolerated but were still not officially recognized. This makes the Edict of Ashoka nothing short of landmark. This is in contrast, as I said, to Ashoka's edicts, where Ashoka had put all religions on an equal footing and not just the different sects of Buddhism. The next major landmark in the evolution of the right to freedom of religion was the Union of Utrecht. All of you might have heard of the Republic of Netherlands. Netherlands was founded upon the Treaty of Utrecht in 1579. This treaty, among other things, provided the citizenry the right to profess their religious beliefs and a freedom from inquisition. However, this freedom was only limited to private practice, and right to public worship of different religious groups was not guaranteed under the treaty. This is important. Here, the Union of Utrecht sought to restrict the freedom of religion to private practice, essentially practicing the faith in your own home. The treaty nonetheless helped in creating an atmosphere of tolerance in the Netherlands where different religious groups could exist peacefully. Another milestone with regard to freedom of religion was seen in Poland in the form of the General Charter of Jewish Liberties, also known as the Statute of Calides. The statute was promulgated in 1204 by the Duke of Greater Poland, which, among other things, granted exclusive jurisdiction over Jewish affairs to Jewish courts. You might notice that at this point that the Judaism has been treated separately from Christianity. This goes to the age-old conflict between Judaism and Christianity, which essentially erupted over the crucifixion of the Christian God, Jesus Christ. The Jewish faith had been persecuted for centuries. Therefore, the General Charter of Jewish Liberties, again, is nothing short of remarkable. In 1204, the Duke of Poland essentially gave the Jewish faith recognition, state recognition, for the very first time. The charter did away with the limit on property which a Jew could hold and also removed restrictions on occupations which they could practice. It also provided them the right to travel, to keep what they inherited, and conduct business, including money lending. Those of you who are students of history will know that those people professing the Jewish faith have been discriminated against. They've always had a penchant towards trade and commerce. However, this has essentially led to them being persecuted by usually those of the Christian community. However, the General Charter of Jewish Liberties sought to offer them refuge. It did away with the limits on property, as I just said. They could buy and purchase property as in which they chose to. It also removed restrictions on the professions they could that they could take part in. Although they were primarily merchants and traders, some of them chose to go into the more conventional profession, and the General Charter of Jewish Liberties helped them do that. The charter also provided them the right to travel. Many times there were restrictions on states that the Jewish people could enter. It also gave them the right to keep what they inherited and conduct business, including money lending. Jewish oaths were made admissible as evidence, and the testimony of a Christian against a Jew, again revolutionary, was made admissible. However, it was admissible only if corroborated by a Jewish witness. What this essentially means is, in a court of law, if a Jew was to testify against a Christian, that evidence, that testimony would be made admissible, which means the court would accept it only if another Jewish witness essentially confirmed what the other Jewish person was saying against the Christian person. The General Charter of Jewish Liberties also gave pride of place to places of worship. Places of importance to Jews, such as synagogues, Jewish cemeteries, and schools, were protected, and people were forbidden from attacking them. Most importantly, Jewish children could no longer be forcibly baptized to become Christians. The statute went a step further, and rather than providing negative rights, also imposed an obligation on Christian neighbors to help a Jewish person if he was attacked, failing which they would have to pay a fine. Now, this is important. There are two types of rights when it comes to human rights, as some of you might be aware. There are negative rights and there are positive rights or obligations. A negative right or a negative obligation essentially tells a state that it shall not deprive one of its citizens of something. Here, the Jewish Charter, the General Charter of Jewish Liberties rather, went further and imposed a positive obligation, a right, if you will, a duty, not a right rather, but a duty on Christian neighbors to help a Jewish person if he was attacked, failing which they would have to pay a fine. Again, where it was carte blanche at a time when Christian people, those professing the Christian faith could attack those professing the Judaic faith. This is again a huge step towards religious tolerance and building a sense of community and kinship. Now moving on to the United Kingdom, England. In England, the development of the right to freedom of religion can be charted back to William Bushel's case. The Bushel's case is an English case in which William Penn and William Mead were charged with unlawful assembly under the Conventicle Act, which forbade religious assemblies of more than 5 people outside the auspices of the Church of England. A little bit of history and context here might be helpful. England traditionally had been a Catholic state. What this means is the King of England, right up until Henry VIII, was coronated, was crowned by the Pope in the Vatican. What this essentially meant was that the King of England and England's subjects pledged allegiance to the Pope, to the Catholic faith in the Vatican. However, Henry VIII ushered in a revolution. He broke away from the Catholic Church and formed what is today known as the Anglican Church or the Church of England, a church with its own tenets completely separate from the Catholic faith. During the time of Bushel's case, there was an ongoing conflict between Protestants and Catholics. And essentially, the Church of England came under the Protestant wing of Christianity. A law passed by the Crown essentially forbade religious assemblies of more than 5 people who were not followers of the Church of England. William Mead and William Penn violated this provision of law, the Conventicle Act, and took part in an unlawful assembly, whereby there was a religious assembly of people not belonging to the Church of England. The jury in the trial of William Penn and William Mead refused to convict the accused, considering the act to be bad in law. This case led to William Penn becoming an advocate of religious freedom, and again is considered a landmark case in the history of the freedom of religion. William Penn went on to write the great case of liberty of conscience and published it in 1670. The book promoted religious freedom and harmony in his American colonies. He also promulgated a charter of privileges in his colonies which protected the religious profession of all people belonging to any religion. William Penn, as the name suggests, went on to found the state of Pennsylvania, initially, of course, a colony in America. And due to his religious convictions, his strong political views with regard to religious freedom, in order to attract settlers of his colony, he promised people religious freedom not limited to Quakers, his own religion, but to other religious minorities as well. William Penn was part of a religion, a faith known as Quakers, a sect, if you will, rather than a religion, that essentially promotes harmony between all religions. This was the first time that religious freedom was granted in an American colony, and therefore William Penn and Pennsylvania again go down in the annals of the history of the right to freedom of religion. The Maryland Toleration Act is the next landmark step in the evolution of the right to freedom of religion in the American colonies. The Maryland Toleration Act of 1649 extended the scope of religious freedom to Trinitarian Christians in Maryland to worship in public. A little bit of history about Maryland here might be useful. Maryland was named after Queen Mary, Bloody Mary as you might know her. Queen Mary was responsible for the slaughter of thousands of non-Catholics in the United Kingdom. That being said, when the Protestant faith through the Church of England essentially took control of the English crown, Catholics were then persecuted. Catholics then moved to the United States in search of refuge. Maryland was one of those colonies, and the Maryland Toleration Act sought to protect these Catholics. The act is notable for using the phrase free exercise thereof. Free exercise thereof being free exercise of your religious faith. This phrase, free exercise thereof, was later replicated in the First Amendment to the US Constitution. Cecilius Calvin, the founder of Maryland, was a Catholic at a time when England was dominated by the Protestant Anglican Church. He wanted to turn Maryland, as I've already told you, into a place of refuge for Catholics fleeing persecution from England, and he was successful. However, funnily enough, By the time the act was passed, the population of Maryland was more Anglican, was more those who believed in the Church of England than Catholic. And the act came to reflect Anglican tolerance, in fact, for Catholics rather than the other way around. So look at how history has a funny way of evening itself out. Initially, the Catholics persecuted the Anglicans. The Anglicans left to the United States. Once the Anglicans were in control of the British monarchy, the Catholics then fled to the United States. The Catholics, but however, went to Maryland in search of refuge. But it turned out that the Anglican population, the Church of England population, far outnumbered the Catholic population. However, the act remained. The act was not repealed, and the Anglican majority community in Maryland displayed a huge amount of tolerance for the Catholic community in Maryland. It's worth recounting the text of the Maryland Toleration Act. No person or persons whatsoever within this province or the islands, ports, harbours, creeks or havens thereunto, belonging, professing to believe in Jesus Christ, shall from henceforth be anyways troubled, molested, or discountenanced for or in respect of his or her religion, nor in the free exercise thereof. This act again is interesting. Look at the first sentence. No person or persons who whatsoever within this province or the islands, ports, harbours, creeks or havens thereunto, belonging, professing to believe in Jesus Christ. So what the act essentially sought to do was to bring the sects of Christianity together and said that as long as you believe in Jesus Christ, you will not be troubled, molested, or discountenanced for or in respect of your religious beliefs. Again, those believing in the Judaic faith and in other religions were excluded. And to hark back to the time of Ashoka, more than 1,000 years ago, where he had recognized the religious freedom of all religions, the Maryland Toleration Act restricted it to those who believed in Jesus Christ. Now let's move on to the next landmark moment in the development of the right to freedom of religion in the United States of America. I'm talking about the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom. Thomas Jefferson, a founding father of the United States of America and the original author of the Declaration of Independence, wanted to incorporate the principles of freedom, equality, and self-government in the laws of Virginia that he was tasked with drafting. Jefferson is an interesting historical figure. He was at the forefront of religious freedom and was one of the architects of the US Constitution and is much revered today for his role in drafting the founding document of the United States of America. However, Jefferson's work really began in the state of Virginia. His primary agenda was to overthrow established religion as it led to persecution of those belonging to minority religions. Jefferson, much like his compatriots, had left the United Kingdom in search of a better life in the United States of America. He proposed to overthrow established religion by providing citizens the freedom of religious conscience and opinion and separation of church and state. This is the first time the doctrine of the separation of church and state was enunciated, and it was Jefferson's doing. In the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom, the enacting clause declared that no man shall be compelled to frequent or support any worship or suffer in any manner on account of his religious belief. People often forget the century-long struggle that went before the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom. If looked in isolation, the enacting clause of the Virginia Statute seems nothing short of revolutionary. But as you've already seen, the Edict of Ashoka, of Torda, the General Charter of Jewish Liberties, and the Union of Utrecht, this struggle was a long one, and it had evolved to a point where Jefferson was finally able to give it a clear enunciation. That statute, the Virginia Statute, further provided that citizens were free to hold and exercise their opinions in matters of religion without affecting their civil capacities. This is very important. Those who believed in a particular faith would often lose their rights of property or inheritance. Therefore, the Virginia Statute wanted to emphasize, basically, that you can follow your religion and that will not affect your civic rights. In the final paragraph of the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom, Jefferson declared the act to be irrevocable. Any attempt to repeal or narrow the operation of the act to infringe would be an infringement of the natural rights of human beings. Again, this is a fascinating clause because Jefferson is trying to say that an act cannot be revoked. Those of you who are students of parliamentary procedure know that if a parliament or an elected legislature can pass an act, that very same legislature should be able to repeal or revoke that act. However, Jefferson felt that this statute on religious freedom was so important that it should be irrevocable. He went on to emphasize that any attempt to revoke this act or the provisions therein would be an infringement of the natural rights of human beings. Again, look at Jefferson according the right to freedom of religion the status of a natural right. Thus, the Virginia Statute guaranteed every individual's right to freedom of religion, thought, and conscience. The declaration in the Virginia Statute is worth quoting in full. No man shall be compelled to frequent or support any religious worship, place, or ministry whatsoever, nor shall be enforced, restrained, molested, or burdened in his body or goods, nor shall otherwise suffer on account of his religious opinions or belief, but that all men shall be free to profess and by argument to maintain their opinions in matters of religion. Now look at this text and compare it with the earlier edicts of Ashoka and Torda and the declarations in the Charter of Jewish Liberties and the Union of Utrecht. The contrast is stark. The first sentence of the declaration says, "No man shall be compelled to frequent or support any religious worship." Here, Jefferson brings in the element of consent, the element of autonomy, individual autonomy, and choice. And he says, no person against his will shall be compelled to support any religious worship, place, or ministry whatsoever. Jefferson goes on to say, nor shall any person be enforced, restrained, molested, or burdened in his body or goods, nor shall otherwise suffer on account of his religious opinions or belief. Again, Jefferson emphasizes that you cannot be made a victim simply because you follow religion A or religion B. And here is where the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom is completely different from the edicts of Torda and the General Charter of Jewish Liberties and Union of Utrecht. What the statute says is that all men shall be free to profess and by argument to maintain their opinions in matters of religion. Maintain their opinions is key, and so the words profess and by argument. The reason here being that what the statute sought to do was to tell people, was to give people rather, the right to defend their religious beliefs, to in fact go as far as maybe even convert other people to their faith, and by argument. And therein lies the key. A civilized society, things should be debated, should be discussed, should be deliberated in a forum of principle, in a forum where it is the argument, where it is the pen that is mightier than the sword. And Jefferson sought to inculcate this in the Virginia Statute of Religious Freedom, saying that each man has the freedom to maintain his, or for that matter, any woman, her opinion in matters of religion. You're looking at a couple of pictures here. This is Jefferson's tombstone, crediting, among other things, him as the author of the Virginia Statute for Religious Freedom. Of course, Jefferson is far better known for his role in drafting the Constitution of the United States of America. The First Amendment, in fact, is considered revolutionary rather than the Constitution itself. The First Amendment to the American Constitution is the most significant legislative instrument with regard to the development of religious freedom in the modern world of nation states. If you've noticed, till now, we've been charting developments. We have been charting charters, we've been looking at acts, we've been looking at regulations and declarations passed by monarchs. Monarchs like Ashoka, like King Zapolya of Hungary, like the Duke of Poland in the General Charter of Jewish Liberties. But the United States of America, being the world's oldest democracy and arguably the first nation state, and the fact that the United States Constitution, the amendment to it rather, guaranteed religious freedom is nothing short of a landmark moment in the quest for the freedom of religion. The First Amendment creates two religious rights. One is known as the Free Exercise Clause, and the second is in the form of the Establishment Clause. Now let's break down these two clauses. The Free Exercise Clause gives every citizen the right to hold whatever religious beliefs he or she chooses and to exercise that belief by attending religious services, praying in public or in private, or by propagating these religious views. Ergo, the name Free Exercise Clause. What this essentially means is, yes, you have a belief, you have the right to believe whatever you want, but that belief is sometimes considered worthless if you cannot exercise that belief, if you cannot propagate that belief. And the Free Exercise Clause essentially empowered citizens of the United States of America gave them the right to hold whatever religious beliefs that he or she chose to hold. Now coming to the Establishment Clause. The Establishment Clause erects a wall of separation between church and state. Now let me break this doctrine down for you once and for all. It's extremely crucial, extremely important that you understand this, because once you can get your head around the doctrine of separation of church and state, the rest of this paper and the module will become very straightforward to understand. What the First Amendment clause, what the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment essentially is trying to say is that the state shall play no role in propagating, professing, promoting one religion. What the Free Exercise Clause does, it gives every citizen the right to do so. It gives every citizen the right to profess a particular religion, propagate a particular religious belief. But at the same time, it restricts state actors, it restricts the legislature, the executive, and the judiciary, essentially Parliament or Congress in the case of the United States, the Supreme Court, and Cabinet or the President in the case of the United States, and the Prime Minister and the President in the case of India, from propagating a particular religion, thereby erecting a wall of separation between church and state. In the United States, for example, there cannot be instruction in the Bible at a state-run or a government-run school. This is because if the state is running a particular school, if a state is funding a particular school, then to have people being instructed in about Christianity or Judaism or Hinduism or any religion for that matter, essentially amounts to the state propagating and promoting one particular religion. Therefore, the Establishment Clause, it is said, creates a wall of separation between church and state by prohibiting the legislature from passing laws that will establish an official religion or preferring one religion over another. What this essentially means is that there is no state religion, as opposed to, let us say, India's neighbors, Pakistan, where Islam is the state religion, or a state such as Ireland, where Catholicism is like the state religion. Therefore, the wall of separation between church and state prohibits the legislature from passing laws that will establish an official religion or preferring one religion over another. You are looking now at the text of the First Amendment of the US Constitution. So students, let us recap everything we've done in this module. We have demonstrated the historical development of the right to freedom of religion. We started with the Edicts of Ashoka. We showed how Ashoka was liberal in thought and spirit, how Ashoka guaranteed religious freedom and religious protection to all religions. We then went on to the Edicts of Torda. We looked at how the declaration by King Zapolia and the subsequent declarations by Isabella, recognizing the different sects of the Christian faith, was also a revolutionary move at a time when the Christian faith was driven by strife. We then looked at the Union of Utrecht, which set up the Republic of the Netherlands, and how it also sought to promote religious freedom. We then went on to look at the General Charter of Jewish Liberties, which gave people of the Judaic faith certain rights that they had been denied for centuries before. We then went on to the developments in the United Kingdom with Bushel's case and showed how the jury found the Conventicle Act prohibiting the unlawful assembly of people not belonging to the Church of England to be bad in law, and acquitting William Penn and William Mead. We also looked at how Penn then moved to the United States, set up his colony of Pennsylvania, and promoted religious freedom in his colony. We also looked at the Maryland Act, the Maryland Toleration Act, which sought to promote religious toleration between the Anglican faith, Church of England, and the Catholic faith. We then looked at the First Amendment to the US Constitution and the role played by Thomas Jefferson and how he drew his inspiration for the First Amendment to the Constitution from the Virginia Act for Religious Freedom. This module has sought to demonstrate how the struggle to establish a wall of separation between religion and state has been an age-old one. That struggle is by no means over, but significant progress has been made, and one can safely say that now in a majority of the countries of the world, there is a move to establish a wall of separation between religion and state. Thank you.